This man died after making the dumbest mistake of his life while camping out in Alaska. In 1981, American wildlife photographer Carl McCunn hired a bush pilot to drop him off in the Alaskan wilderness. He planned on camping by himself for 5 months to take photographs of wildlife, but would soon realize he'd forgotten to arrange for a return flight. As the weather grew colder and his supplies began to dwindle, Carl soon realized that he may never return home. At one point after he lost all hope, Carl was seen by an Alaskan state trooper plane but was ignored because he raised his fist in celebration, and a raised fist is known to be a signal that everything's okay. Referring to this incident, Carl wrote in his journal, "It's certainly my fault I'm here now. Man, I can't believe it. I really feel like a klutz. Now I know why nobody's shown up since." Sometime afterward, Carl ended up taking his own life by shotgun. Carl's campsite and corpse were found a few weeks later, along with his journal which detailed his harrowing final months. A 23-year-old college student from Taiwan was forced to have both of his legs amputated after suffering severe frostbite that his doctor couldn't believe was real. He claimed it was the result of being stuck outside after a bad motorcycle accident, but the truth was he'd stuck his legs in dry ice for more than 10 hours while trying to pull off a massive insurance fraud scheme. His friend and accomplice tied him to the chair, so he had no choice but to endure the excruciating ice burns. Instead of the $1.7 million payout they were hoping for, both of the young men were sent to prison for insurance fraud. This photo of Samantha Koenig was taken by serial killer Israel Keyes to convince the victim's family that she was still alive, so that he could demand $30,000 in ransom from them for her safe return. But in reality, Koenig had already been dead for several weeks, and Keyes had sewn her eyes open using fishing line. The family paid some of the ransom before the killer dumped Samantha's body in a lake and never contacted them again. 5 days before her wedding in September of 2009, Yale medical student Annie Lee suddenly went missing in the basement of a Yale laboratory. On the actual day she was supposed to get married, her body was found hanging upside down inside a wall cavity in the building. Her murderer, a lab technician who worked in the building, was eventually caught and sentenced to 44 years in prison. After his phone was stolen in 2020, 16-year-old Kevin Bui set a Denver house on fire that he mistakenly thought was the thief's home. The blaze tragically killed 5 members of an innocent family, including 2 young kids. Bui was tried as an adult and sentenced to 60 years in prison. After suffering a stroke in 2010, UK woman Sarah Colwell started speaking with a Chinese accent despite never even visiting China. No matter how hard she tries, Sarah can't return to her normal voice. She became one of less than 100 people to ever be diagnosed with foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition caused by damage to the speech part of the brain. This is when streaming gets taken way too far. A Russian YouTuber was recently sentenced to 6 years in a maximum security prison after he allegedly caused his pregnant girlfriend to die from hypothermia during a live stream. Known as Stas Reflay, the streamer reportedly forced his girlfriend onto a freezing cold balcony wearing nothing but her underwear. Sometime later, he pulled her back inside and appeared confused, saying, "Chat, she has no pulse, she's pale, she's not breathing." He then laid her lifeless body on the couch, opened up a bottle of liquor, and continued streaming for an additional 2 hours before authorities finally arrived. The streamer's actions were apparently part of a disturbing trend known as trash streaming that's popular in Russia, where streamers perform dangerous or degrading stunts for donations. According to reports, Stas was sent $1,000 by a viewer to watch him abuse his girlfriend. The 34-year-old only ended his stream after police entered his home and pronounced his girlfriend dead. The 1985 film Mask is based on the true story of Rocky Dennis, an American boy with an extremely rare bone disorder. It causes bone to build up excessively in the skull, resulting in compression of the brain. Doctors initially told him he would die before his 7th birthday, but Rocky ended up living to the age of 16. After being told he would die if he didn't change his habits, a morbidly obese Scottish man went an entire year without eating any food. The 450-pound 27-year-old only consumed multivitamins and potassium tablets for 382 days, only going number 2 once every 40 to 50 days. He set a record for the longest fast ever recorded and ended up losing 275 pounds. French chemist Antoine Lavoisier wanted to perform one last experiment before he was executed in 1792. He told his colleague he would try to blink as long as possible after being beheaded by a guillotine. Some sources say he continued to blink for up to 10 seconds afterwards. Cyclopia is a real congenital disorder marked by the failure of the embryo to properly divide the orbits of the eyes into two separate cavities, resulting in a single eye in the middle of the face. It's usually caused by a mutation in the Sonic the Hedgehog gene, real, and typically results in death within a few hours after birth. The tragic condition occurs in 1 out of every 200 miscarried fetuses, and the maximum recorded lifespan of a child born with cyclopia is 1 day. Following the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, people have been putting up wanted posters across New York City targeting other healthcare CEOs. The posters read, "Healthcare CEOs should not feel safe," after his 28-year-old teacher allegedly made creepy remarks to a 6th-grade girl. A young student catfished the man and made him think he was talking to a 14-year-old girl. After receiving concerning messages from the teacher, the boy reported him to police, and he now faces charges of sexual exploitation. Macho Man Randy Savage died from a massive heart attack while driving with his wife, as an autopsy later found his coronary artery to be 90% blocked. Just a few days before he died, Randy had a routine checkup with his doctor who suggested a heart scan, which would have easily detected the fatal blockage, but Randy decided to put it off until his next visit. Known as the Meteor, this was the result of 5 floors of the World Trade Center being compressed together when the towers collapsed on 9/11. It's not known if there are human remains inside. After failing to assassinate King Louis XV in 1757, Robert Francois Damiens was sentenced to be executed by having his skin ripped open, molten lead and sulfur poured into his wounds, and dismemberment by 4 horses. Upon hearing this, Damiens replied, "Well, it's going to be a tough day." During the execution, Damiens was reportedly still alive after all of his limbs were ripped off, so his remaining torso was burned at the stake. Earlier this year, 24-year-old French student Matthew Latour received a hair transplant in Turkey so that he could finally grow a beard. But the result looked atrocious, as Latour found out it was performed by a real estate agent, not a licensed surgeon. Upon learning the damage was irreversible, he ended his life. From the 70s to the 90s, more than 20 people were killed by postal workers in at least 40 separate incidents. It happened so frequently that going postal became a slang term for becoming exceptionally angry. This was referenced in the 1996 Jumanji movie when the hunter goes to a sporting goods store to replace his gun, and the salesman asks him, "You don't work for the post office, do you?" In June of 2007, a 6-year-old girl unknowingly sat on the poorly maintained drain of a public pool. The resulting suction from the drain caused 21 feet of her intestines to be forced out of her body. After 16 surgeries and several transplants, she tragically died 9 months later. In 1989, Canadian hockey player Duncan McPherson completely vanished at an Austrian ski resort. 14 years later, in 2003, his mangled body and snowboard were found in the ice on the mountain, showing severe injuries consistent with machinery impact. Investigators concluded that he was accidentally run over by a snowcat and buried in a small gap, where his body remained hidden for more than a decade until the glacier started to melt. Mississippi man Jimmy Lee Gray was sentenced to death by gas chamber after kidnapping, sexually assaulting, and murdering a 3-year-old girl. When the gas was released, Lee began bashing his head against a metal pole behind the chair. The toxic fumes had failed to kill him quickly, leaving him gasping in agony for nearly 10 minutes. In 2021, zipline instructor Joaquin Romero tragically fell to his death after sacrificing himself for a customer. Realizing the zipline couldn't support both of their weights, he released himself to save the client. Ira Hayes was a Native American Marine who was one of the men photographed raising the American flag over Iwo Jima in 1945. But despite national fame after the war, Hayes suffered from severe PTSD and descended deep into alcoholism. In January of 1955, he tragically ended up freezing to death while drunk in the Arizona desert. In 1958, the U.S. Air Force accidentally dropped a nuke on 4 kids playing in the woods of South Carolina. Thankfully, it didn't have its nuclear core installed yet, but still caused several injuries. Discovered at the age of 18, Susan Peters had a very successful acting career until she was shot during a hunting trip in 1945. Her husband's rifle accidentally fired into her spine, leaving her permanently paralyzed from the waist down. A few years later, one day Peters told her doctor, "I'm getting awfully tired. I think it would possibly be better if I just died." She then starved herself for the next few months until tragically dying from pneumonia at the young age of 31. In 1981, three young men found the murdered body of a woman laying in a roadside ditch in Ohio. She was known as the Buckskin Girl because of the poncho she'd been wearing, but police struggled to identify her for decades. That was until 37 years later in 2018 when DNA analysis identified her as hitchhiker Marsha King. Her mother had still been living in the same house with the same phone number, never giving up hope that her daughter may return home one day. Marsha's murder remains unsolved, but the case is still open. In a form of doping known as boosting, wheelchair athletes with spinal injuries will sometimes intentionally injure themselves below the waist to cause their bodies to respond by raising blood pressure, thus enhancing their performance. Techniques include clamping down on a catheter to overfill the bladder, breaking toe bones, and administering electric shocks to the legs, feet, and testicles. Boosting has been completely banned by the International Paralympic Committee since 1994. In 2009, 25-year-old chemistry student Vladimir Likonos died after his chewing gum exploded in his mouth. He had a strange habit of dipping his gum in citric acid for extra sourness, but accidentally used an explosive powder from his chemistry experiments that was 4 times stronger than TNT. Likely caused by the reaction with his saliva or chewing pressure, the explosion blew off his jaw and led to his eventual death. According to a 2011 study, children exposed to family violence show the same patterns of brain activity as soldiers exposed to combat. Throughout Chinese history, it was common for parents to castrate their boys as a way to escape poverty. Both the shaft and the nuts would be sliced off with a knife at the same time. These castrated members of society, known as eunuchs, were considered thoroughly pure and therefore qualified as high-ranking civil servants. This disturbing system lasted until 1924, with the last imperial eunuch dying in 1996. Within seconds of the band Great White taking the stage at the Station nightclub in 2003, faulty pyrotechnics ignited the flammable acoustic foam that surrounded the stage. Far exceeding the building's capacity, all 462 people quickly flooded the exits as the entire building was rapidly engulfed in flames. But many struggled to find the exits due to the heavy smoke, leading to a pileup at the front entrance that prevented anyone else from escaping. Multiple survivors also claimed that 2 bouncers blocked the stage door as fans attempted to escape the building, telling them that the door was only to be used by the band. In the end, 100 people lost their lives, including Great White's guitarist Ty Longley. One man named Mike Vargas managed to survive for 90 minutes inside the building. He was trampled by a mob trying to escape and only survived because he was insulated by all the bodies burning around him. He walked out with only minor burns but still suffers from severe PTSD. Amanda Eller was lost for 17 days in the Maui wilderness after a 3-mile hike turned into a full-on nightmare. She set out on foot without a phone, food, or water since she only planned to be out for a short adventure. But after veering off the trail, she wasn't able to find her way back. The 35-year-old later managed to survive a flash flood with a broken leg and suffered many hallucinations throughout the ordeal. She said she kept hearing voices that were telling her what to do if she wanted to survive. Amanda was eventually spotted by a helicopter pilot who turned a different way that nobody would normally search on a whim. In 2022, an Irish woman was hospitalized with extreme stomach pain and had to have her appendix removed after years of holding in farts around her boyfriend. Constance Fisher was a paranoid schizophrenic who murdered her 3 children in 1954 to save them from evil. She spent several years in a mental asylum before being released, only to kill 3 more of her children in 1966. In 2012, Donna Summer died from lung cancer at the age of 63, even though she wasn't a smoker. The singer believed it was caused by inhaling the toxic fumes from the Twin Towers after they fell on 9/11. Since the dust filled the air around Ground Zero for several months afterwards, and Summer lived nearby. In fact, around 6,400 people have since died from 9/11 related illnesses, more than double the amount that died on the actual day of the attacks. The Dani tribe in Indonesia is known to cut off parts of their fingers after the death of a loved one. In 1928, Alfred Lowenstein, the 3rd richest man in the world at the time, completely disappeared from his private jet in the middle of a flight. After Alfred took too long to use the bathroom, his secretary went in to check on him, but the bathroom was empty and the exit door connected to it was wide open. There have been many theories put forth, but Alfred most likely opened the wrong door by accident and plunged thousands of feet to his death. After just one date with him in 2018, Arizona woman Jacqueline Adis allegedly sent a man over 159,000 texts over a 10-month span. Some of the texts were incredibly disturbing threats like, "I'd make sushi out of your kidneys and chopsticks out of your hand bones. I'd wear your fascia in the top of your skull and your hands and feet." Adis was later arrested for trespassing inside the man's home while he was out of the country, but she was later declared mentally incompetent to stand trial and the charges were dropped. This is the 2,000-year-old skull of Mary Magdalene on display at St. Maximin Basilica in France. It's considered to be one of the most precious relics in all of Christendom. In 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson drove his car into a ditch while driving home from a party. He called his parents and told them he was fine, but wasn't sure exactly where he was. Nearly 50 minutes into the call, he suddenly yelled, "Oh shit," and then went silent. He's never been seen nor heard from again. This is the face of a mass shooter, David Katz, showing no emotion as he plays in a Madden tournament against other pro gamers. Katz was an elite player known as Bread, who always had the same lifeless expression on his face whether he won or lost a game. During a professional Madden 19 tournament in Jacksonville, Florida, Katz refused to shake the hand of his opponent after losing to him and stormed out of the tournament. Shortly afterwards, he returned with 2 handguns and fired 12 rounds into the players and crowd. 2 people were killed and 10 others were wounded before Katz turned the gun on himself. This eerie photo shows the red dot from David's sight on the chest of 22-year-old victim Elijah Clayton, who made a last-minute decision to enter the tournament. It was later revealed that Katz had suffered from numerous mental illnesses and had been institutionalized several times throughout his life. EA Sports offered its most heartfelt sympathies and donated $1 million to the victims' families in lieu of the senseless tragedy. An X-ray revealed that a 300-year-old Mexican statue of Jesus has real human teeth. They're believed to have been donated by worshippers as a way to get closer to the religious figure. After killing his girlfriend with a hatchet, 30-year-old Philadelphia man William Kemmler became the first person to be executed by electric chair. While it was supposed to demonstrate the effectiveness and humanity of electrocution, the punishment went horribly wrong. They underestimated the amount of electricity needed to quickly and painlessly end a man's life, so Kemmler was still conscious after the first shock. When physicians noticed he was still breathing in agony, they hit him with a second shock that was more powerful, causing his entire body to convulse violently and start smoking. Kemmler ended up with bubbling skin, melted eyes, and a foaming mouth, and the entire room reeked of burning flesh as many spectators ended up passing out from the horror. But despite this, the electric chair would still continue to be used for more than 100 years afterwards. In 2014, author Richard Britton traveled 500 miles to find a teenage girl who left him a bad review on his recent book, then smashed a wine bottle over her head, sending her to the hospital where she nearly died. Richard was jailed for 30 months following the vicious attack. In 1971, 46-year-old New Jersey accountant John List lost his job at a bank and couldn't stand to tell his family. After a failed job search, List worried that his family would turn away from God due to a lack of stability and therefore miss out on heaven. So he felt he was left with no choice but to murder his entire family and disappear forever. He killed his wife, mother, and 3 children by gunshot before vanishing for the next 18 years. List had planned out the murders so meticulously that nearly a month had passed before anyone suspected that something was wrong. He assumed a new identity in Denver, remarried, and evaded capture for nearly 2 decades, until a neighbor finally recognized him after seeing him on America's Most Wanted.